special link for you, Kashif. So it's humaninterfaces.co/tech talks is a
Okay.
calendar link that anybody who is interested to explore their coaching journey further would I'll be happily obliged to schedule a complimentary session on that link.
Oh, very good. Thank you so much. Really appreciate for.
Welcome to the OTech Talks podcast, where it's all about working on technologies. You will hear the latest tech information, and your host, Kashif Manzoor, brings together product overviews, how-tos, best practices, tips and tricks, and troubleshooting techniques.
Welcome to OpenTechTalks.tv. Today we have a guest speaker with us, Vladimir Baranov, and he's the leading coach in his space. And I'm really excited to take him on the show because that's what, as a technology folks, we need some time more clarity what we are doing it or what maybe we are targeting it. So Vladimir, welcome to the Open Tech Talks.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much for joining. So Vladimir, if you can give us some context what you have been doing it and what is currently you are doing it, and that will help to set the stage for audience, and then we will go and understand from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Vladimir Baranov. I'm an executive coach for leaders and technology founders. And what I focus on is working with very experienced executives and entrepreneurs to figure out what is preventing them to get to the next level. Now, that's a little bit
Mhm,
broad and it's a meta, but I have a lot of good examples. Some
mhm,
people I have come up through being a lawyer first became a technologist. Maybe it's a
mhm,
technologist now operating in a legal environment. It might be
mhm,
engineer operating in, let's say, DC political environment. Once you start
mhm,
crossing those environments, our previous education fails to allow us to create models of how it is to operate in these new environments. And
mhm,
individuals that I speak to are getting frustrated when they're interacting with other people who have different kind of background. And I work through their difficulties and I explore the possibilities for them to get next level from that perspective. Another way of looking at it, as leaders and executives, we are responsible for creating meaning out of the noise that is market or that is actually the rest of the universe. And a lot of new leaders are still have remnants of the hierarchical reporting lines from the past, where they expect somebody else to tell them what to do. And this is where the biggest transition happens, where they have to accept a lot more ownership and responsibility in order to take in what's in front of them and translating it for the rest organization in line with their vision.
Okay, let's run through some scenarios
Sure.
as our audience are working in a technology industry primarily, and they are maybe CIOs, CTOs, or IT managers, directors, or VPs, or even just a consultant and developers, or maybe technologists. So, take an example of working in a corporate world. You are aware about it, how the corporate world and culture works, and there is always an hierarchical, organization where you report to certain set of people's manager, and let's go on. So, in that context, if someone is in the ladder, is an individual contributor, and he what should he be doing it to maybe take his career to next level, or if someone else is in the management position, what he should be doing it to take it to the next level for him or her.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So to summarize, we're talking about how to take individual contributors' career and also managers' career to the next level in a corporate environment. One of the most important things, and while it sounds cliche, is to actually understand your context.
Mhm,
A lot of different companies have a growth ladder where they have different positions defined and different rules defined for how individuals need to be getting there.
right.
Understanding that ladder and understanding how it is applied in your context by a specific practitioner, which is probably your manager or probably a committee of managers, is the most
Mhm.
important thing that you can do. One of
Mhm.
the things that I've noticed that a lot of engineering folks and engineering managers do is that we think inside our heads because we're probably the smartest person that we know. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, when it comes to interacting to the structures within the organization, it mostly nothing has to do with logic, but probably with a precedent that has been established by the previous managers of the organization.
Mhm.
If you understand the historical context and if you start talking to others who have been through the process, who've gotten to the next level within your organization, and also additionally schedule, let's say, HR sessions for them to explain how they see it, and also talk to your manager, you will start seeing overlaps of how decisions actually being made versus
Mhm.
you reviewing the ladder structure and also you're reviewing the rules of how you're supposed to match up to the rules. Those
Mhm.
rules are historical. Someday, maybe years ago, maybe 10 years ago, maybe 2 years ago,
Mhm.
the management
Mhm.
came up with that letter and put all the instructions for how to get promoted. It might not be accurate and actual in the moment because in the end, it's your managers and other practitioners that are implementing that letter in place. So that applies both to management and applies to individual contributors. Specifically for managers, and also applies for individual contributors who want to be managers, the best way to advance forward is actually taking on more responsibility without having that responsibility being assigned to your role. If there are opportunities as you're doing your day-to-day work to take on projects or tasks which will demonstrate your leadership of organization, of mentoring, of peer review, of assisting others across the company, and to make sure that it also gets noticed by your superiors, that will take you much further in your career than just doing your work. Because number one
Mhm.
thing that a lot of skilled managers do when they promote others, or skilled leaders do when they promote others from below up, is they try to eliminate the risk of making sure that they're not promoting wrong person. Because if they're promoting wrong person, then there's only
Mhm.
two options. One, you keep the person in the wrong role because demoting that
Mhm.
person is really, really painful, or you let that
Right.
person go outside of the organization. And that is also
Mhm.
painful because the company loses right now a person who's probably incredibly talented asset for the role we're in right now.
Mhm.
If you're an
Mhm.
individual, take your responsibility on yourself to vet their risk by demonstrating yourself that you can operate at much higher management responsibilities, then it's much easier for your superiors to make those decisions. What could those be? Responsibilities could be that you can demonstrate. One, perhaps quality of your presentations you're presenting to upper management. Perhaps how you engage across different business verticals and how you cooperate with others. Perhaps it's how you mentor and perhaps how the 360 feedback comes through the organization. What are outside of the company activities do you attend, conferences, workshops, and how much of that do you bring in back into the organization? And to others, which also can demonstrate your leadership potential and will help you get assigned the role that you're the best fit for.
Mhm. Right. Very, very, I think, wonderful tips. Now, I will take forward this discussion to, to in the corporate world, which is a common challenge, which we say is that as an individual contributor or a manager, sometimes people, maybe based on their introvert or extrovert personality, that they do a lot of good stuff, but they don't go and tell to people. And then you will see some of the folks, they're not doing anything, but they are more talkative, and then they go and then make a lot of noise out of very small initiatives or maybe things.
Mhm.
So maybe some tips for those folks who are not talkative and then but they're doing a wonderful work, how they can take this as where they feel that telling about themselves is like maybe making a sales.
Mhm.
How what is the best strategy for them, and is it the right way to go to do it?
Absolutely. I think there is a proper way for you. I don't think there is a
Hmm.
right way for everybody because everybody's
Okay.
personality is very different. But on top
Hmm.
of that, the personality of your audience who needs to learn about your achievements is also very different. There are some
Hmm.
managers who are
Right.
very technical. There are some managers who
Right.
are not technical. There are some managers who perhaps are introverts themselves or maybe extroverts, and we have to adjust our message accordingly. This is actually one of the reasons that I named my company Human Interfaces, because the sensitivity
Mhm.
between the two humans, or between human audiences, is so sensitive
Mhm.
to so many different parameters in order for that information to
Mhm.
flow clearly in the way that it was intended to flow, that we have to stay conscious that it's not just a message, that there's so much
Right.
more over technical and human overhead that comes with those bytes of information in order to land with the manager and with their superiors in the proper way or with your audience. Now, going
Mhm.
back to the practical advice, the thing which I'm going to say is probably introverts are not going to like in general, but you have to talk about your achievements or you have to
Mhm.
communicate. Let me be clear. It doesn't have to be talking, but you have
Yeah.
to communicate
Communicate.
your achievements. Because if you don't, the only place that it exists right now is in your head. It
Right.
has to get out of your head in some shape or form. And it is your responsibility to discover what is the medium that you're most comfortable communicating it over, or which medium are you willing to learn more in order to communicate that? Because otherwise, you're placing burden, and I have to say it one more time, burden on your audience to thoroughly examine your work in order to assess what kind of genius you are. And when
Mhm.
you think about your audience, they're probably as busy as yourself, and they probably do
True.
not have time to assess and to evaluate what kind of contributions you have made. Now, if you're a super introverted person, and there's nothing wrong with it, like we all have different
True.
personalities, it's good to find ways for you to express yourself in ways that are comfortable to you. If let's say you don't like talking to individuals, maybe perhaps you can generate a presentation or text document or a message on Slack, or even react with
Mhm.
emojis to proper context and proper messages in order to establish what your values and what your contributions are.
Mhm.
So, but it
Mhm.
has to
Very
get,
well.
but the most important thing is has to get out of your head and be somewhere for others to understand what it is about. And just I'll
Mhm.
add one small point. And another point that's super important to translate your achievement to your audience. If let's say your manager is not technical or your manager perhaps is not as technical as you are, while
Mhm.
yourself you might be using the latest AI library from NVIDIA, your
Right.
manager probably has not checked upon what the latest library is. It's important
Right.
that we translate our technical achievements into business outcomes.
Mhm.
I've done this, and this increases sales by this much, or this makes sales work this much easier, or this is reduces expense by this much. Because between individuals who are non-technical and technical, the best language that works is impact at the business level.
Mhm.
And this is where it will help to learn what is your company runs on, what are its priorities, what are its business impacts, what are you actually building? Are you building Toyotas for everybody, or are you building Ferrari? Because you might be building a Ferrari in a factory that only needs Toyotas to sell. So there could be also be
Right.
a business mismatch.
Right. And you brought a point, very, very good point, of the business context, and evangelizing it in a way that you are linking back to business. This is one of the common problem I think we all tech folks have, that we sometime, or maybe most of the time, we get stuck in too much technical, and then we are not able to link back to why we are doing any technical stuff. You rightly pointed out that. So based on your experience, any recipe to manage this situation?
I think the best recipe is to understand, as you correctly mentioned, the why. If
Mm.
your why is purely technical, then probably the outcome of it would be only recognized by only yourself and perhaps few other technical folks.
Mhm.
If your why is more business driven, then it's more likely that your impacts are going to be recognized by the whole company. This learning also translates into entrepreneurship. A lot of engineers trying to build their own businesses build product first and then go to the
Right.
market and try to sell it. Unfortunately for many, finding out that nobody actually wants what they've built, regardless of how fantastic it is technologically. Again, if people are only on the market to buy Toyota Camrys, they're not going to buy a Ferrari. The more agile approach, and this is also you can take this step when trying to figure out the why, is reach out to your stakeholders or reach out to your potential clients and ask, what do you actually need? What are your technical needs? What are your business needs? And then build the solutions for that. It's the same thing when it comes to talking in technical language. Most of the time, including myself, when I say something very, very technical, half of it to show off, half to find friends who understand me when I speak to that. But it's not because I want the audience to actually understand me. It's like you're trying to figure out the cipher code, which will enable you to communicate with the other party clear. A really good example that somebody shared with me really worked for me very well. So if you have doctor trying to talk to a lawyer about their professional experience using their professional words, they're not going to be understanding each other. And the
Right.
best way for them to talk to each other is use analogies. One of the examples of analogy is this one that presents about complexity of talking between business and technology, but also most of the technologies are actually in the position of doctors, and most of our stakeholders and clients are patients. And when they come to us, they're not interested in medical research. They're not interested in our background. They're not interested in all the huge problems we solved. The only thing they're interested in is, am I going to live? For how long? And what do I need to do in order to achieve that? And maybe scope of that information. All the rest of details left to us, the professionals, but for them, the client, these are the most important things to talk about. And sometimes we'll lose sight of that as technologists.
I think you mentioned very valid points, and I think another point which you brought from a founder's point of view, where as the technical folks they start developing anything, and then trying to find out where we need to take it to the market. So in that context, have you worked with some founders where you got to some level them or help them to achieve it? And any tips on that area also really appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And you might have heard already about the lean startup framework or a business canvas
Yeah,
approach.
right, right.
And the way that that approach is described is that you try to approach your startup building in a very
Mhm.
agile methodology where you
Mm,
build the smallest amount of code possible in order to match the customer's requirement. Customer's requirement is gotten from the prospective client interviews. So you go out there in the wild
mm,
talking about industry or talking about a topic or talking about context. But part of those
mm,
questions you ask, what are your needs? What are your needs in this specific area? And when you talk to
mm,
about 100 people, you'll kind of start getting repeating patterns of what exactly they're looking for. Then you go
mm,
back to your office, build the smallest possible thing, maybe like 2 lines of code. And then you go back
mm,
to the people who have mentioned that they have the same problem and saying, am I on the right track? And they say,
mm,
yes, but I want it blue. But yes, I also want it square. But yes, I want it also to have a spring attached to it. Then you go back to your office, add a little bit more again, and then you talk to people again. And this is could be 2 weeks, could be a month, could be 6 month iterations,
true.
but it has to be the smallest iterations if possible, because this way you are in symbiotic relationship with your client, moving in a direction of the right solution for that use
Mm,
case, and in not
mm,
propagating that solution just only using your own knowledge, because you probably do not understand client's context 100%.
mm. True, 100%, 100%. So let's now understand how Vladimir started coaching.
Can you repeat that?
I mean, when did you started coaching?
Oh, when?
When
Oh,
you
sorry. Oh,
realized?
sorry. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. When you realized that okay, now I need to be maybe reach a stage where I need to coach.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I've been in a management position for over a decade, and as part of that
Mhm,
management, over time, I realized that I wasn't just managing, but also coaching individuals who were reporting to me. And it
mhm.
was very emotionally rewarding to see individuals grow and achieve the things that they haven't
True.
achieved before, and also report on things that they have not heard some of the concepts explained this way before. Now,
Mhm.
I have certain brains in my head, right? But most of the information I've learned comes from the books and experience. Like we're all a
Right.
combination of such. And I'm it's a great pleasure for me to share that information with others and incorporate it in their context. once I have moved on from my previous position, I thought, what can I do to explore and make the biggest impact to individuals out there?
True.
And I decided that if I was going to pursue something of my own, I'll be locking in all that opportunity with just one assignment. But because I now coach at multiple different accelerators and I coach individuals and also coach companies, it helps me to multiply my impact through of my experience on those
Hmm.
individuals. And I that's kind of I locked into that role and decided to investigate a little bit further.
Hmm. All right. And how you take it up? First step. What was your first step? I just wanted to get into maybe right. You left that position, and then or not. It must not be one day you decided it. So there must be some sequential steps.
Absolutely. So none of the decisions, uh, we have a lot of myths and narratives. There all of a sudden something comes to somebody and they have this magical thing and they just
Mm-hmm.
over a week period just do something great. I think I had a contemplation of becoming a coach for a couple years, and
Hmm.
over that time, I started also thinking, what could be the first steps?
Right.
What do I need to do before actually jumping off the cliff? But
Mm.
then before jumping off the cliff, there's only so much you can do, and what you know, even after talking to everybody,
Right.
because when you jump off, it's going to be your own
True.
context.
True.
And others, while they can share their experience, it's not going to be exactly the same. So it is your
Mm.
responsibility to kind of pre-build a parachute initially, but then you kind of have to adjust it on the fly.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Time period, it could vary for many for different people. I think initial idea maybe came to me like 2-3 years ago, and I
Hmm.
slowly refined it over the time until I was able to depart from a previous position and join the position that I'm in now.
All right. And most of the time, what type of these individuals you coach? Are you group wise, or how do you provide this coaching? Or do
Yes,
you have
so
some self?
I coach individuals and I coach
Mhm.
companies, but even if I
Okay.
coach companies, it is still a series of individual coaching, although with the within the same context.
Similar
Um,
context.
I occasionally moderate
Hmm.
mastermind groups of
Hmm.
technologists or executives, where
Hmm.
then the help does not just come from my moderation, but also through a
All right.
shared experience of others in the group. Because
Mm.
one of the important things, and this is a very familiar saying, is that misery needs company. So in a sense, every stressed technologist, it is important
Mm.
to find your peer group of people who are just like
Right.
yourself,
True.
so you can relate to where you're coming from and get that advice from others who are exactly at the same level.
Right. 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 So, if we think about from any one thing you wish you know before starting, or maybe okay, what was the one biggest challenge, or maybe you thought that you would have known before jumping from the cliff?
Absolutely. So I think one of the most important things, and it helps you plan more, it will take longer in which any traction, any new sessions, any income, any learning, any implementation, anything just takes longer than we think. Because most of the technologists operate at the speed of technology. You can switch the windows, you can run things, you can play things, you can watch the progress bar. But when it comes to human relationships, and especially for my case, the executive coaching is all about human relationships. Humans take time to think. Take time to analyze. Humans forget. Humans get to be reminded. Humans all of a sudden remember that they want to do something. And because we don't have that view as a technologist of how other humans really think, it just overall it feels like it takes much longer than it's supposed to, but it's just the nature of things.
Okay, and you must be also getting some bad recommendations while starting the coaching program. So, what are the some common which we should avoid it?
Can you rephrase the question? Are you saying like
I mean, we
why you should
usually,
not?
yeah. So when we start doing something or maybe planning to do something,
Yes.
and some of maybe colleagues, friends, or known people, they give you some recommendation which are not the good recommendations.
Yeah,
But so what? How we can avoid them, or how we can find out this is a good recommendation, or maybe this is a bad recommendation?
got it, got it. Um, Everybody has opinions,
Right.
and the one caveat to always remember is that everybody's opinion comes from their experience and their
True.
context.
Right.
If, let's say, you're talking to an executive of a medical company and advising you not to pursue starting your aerospace company,
Mm-hmm.
it is useful to a degree, but because they have never been in aerospace before, in the aerospace
Mm-hmm.
industry, their device might not necessarily be a good fit for that
Right.
industry.
Right.
Also, my mother tells me that I'm great at whatever I do. Now, I don't know
Right.
if the market agrees with that. I mean, I
Mm.
like that. I like that commentary. I like that advice that I will achieve anything I apply my mind to. But is it
Mm.
necessarily good advice? Perhaps not.
Mm.
And there's
Mm.
obviously the spectrum because between your advice of your mother and
Yeah.
advice of an executive who you think could tell you the answer,
Mm.
and some could
Mm.
not. Ideally, the best
Mm.
type of advice is not holistic. Like it's not holistic.
Mm.
Like it's not broad,
Mm.
but it's to a specific use case
Mm.
from an individual who has done it before.
Mm.
Let's say,
Right.
uh, let's say you're trying to figure out which conference to go to for your specific
Mm.
thing.
Right.
If an individual went to previous companies and they figured out that this
Mm.
type of audience is there and they've been to there,
Mm.
that is the right person to listen to
Mm.
some advice to. But
Mm.
again, when you're going to go there, your context is
Mm.
going to be different. You are going to be there instead of them. It's going to be your
Wow.
eyes and your sensors observing everything. So it's going to be very different. So I would say is like whenever you're building something, it's a
Mm.
fabric of little
Mm.
pieces of other people's advice. And it's never like
Mm.
the whole fabric is composed
True.
of just one person's comment.
Mm. True. True. Right. And how is it going? Quite
It's go
busy.
it's going great. I'm finding a lot of people that need
Mm.
help.
Mm.
It's great for my business, but it's also interesting to explore because it is a part that is missing in our engineering education
Mm.
to how to relate to other humans effectively. And so when we actually go into work and we go into the corporations or we start our own companies, we kind of learn that on our own. And it's a
True.
very, 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 very difficult subject. It's almost like
True.
learning physics without textbook, and
True.
we're all struggling. I just
True.
happen to read a lot of textbooks outside of our curriculum, which helps me help others who are struggling.
Now, you rightly pointed out that there is a challenge the way education is, and we tech folks comes with background. We only focus on tech code, and when we want to pass the messages and want to, in other words, sell our view onto that or to bring the business context, there is a challenge.
Mhm.
There is a challenge, and you're doing a great work to help even not individuals, or even someone is starting a business, or maybe he's starting his own tech initiative or anything. That's really, I mean, appreciated. That's the way I can see.
Thank you.
Okay, before we conclude our session, so what are the common challenges you face in the technology, guys? And if there are any tips from you, one or two or three tips before we conclude our session that will help them to, get on the path where they can reach to some area which can change their lives, maybe their careers.
Absolutely. I think the most important is to have understanding that your model of the universe might not be the model of the universe the company has and other
Mhm.
people around you.
Mhm.
I've spoken to a lot of frustrated engineers who don't feel they get valued or promoted properly
Mhm. True.
because they value their work with their own values,
Hmm.
but not with the values of the company and
Mhm.
with the values of the manager. Now,
Mhm.
you can find out that you might not be a right fit for this company and they just don't value it at all, regardless of the
Right.
impact you make.
Mhm.
But most of the time, your efforts are not communicating well to the ones who work with you and in the context of your company. At least myself, I used to imagine that life is like a video game, like a SimCity simulator, where when you do X, you do Y, and then you get Z. Unfortunately, real life is not as linear, and every single equation depends very much on the context, depends very much on your use case, and depends very much on your specific contribution in order to get the next level. But then, I mean, what is next level is? Like getting definitions of your context and clarifying more details of where you are, who is who, what is their role, is super important.
So, thank you so much for sharing your insights and valuable tips to the audience. So, if someone wants to reach out to you, is there any website or mass channel where they can reach out to?
Absolutely, and thank you for asking. My website is humaninterfaces.co, and I also reserved a special link for you, Kashif. So it's humaninterfaces.co/tech talks is a calendar link that anybody who is interested to explore their coaching journey further I'll be happily obliged to schedule a complimentary session on that link.
Oh, very good. Thank you so much. Really appreciate for offering that one. And I'll also pass into the show notes. Thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely, Kashif. It's my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the O-Tech Talks podcast, and be part of Tech Talks at otechtalks.tv. It's a turf to share ideas, insights, and innovations.